Welcome to Off Road with Frank Ferraro. Today's conversation is about leadership under pressure, institutional decision making, and how major systems evolve when money, power, and accountability collide. My guest is Jay Paterno, longtime college football coach and author of the new book Blitzed, which takes a hard look at the modern realities of college football, from NIL and transfers to mental health, leadership, and the business forces reshaping the sport. This is not a highlight reel discussion, and it's not about re-enlightening the past. It's about what happens inside large institutions, how leaders respond when incentives change, and what the future of college athletics may look like in a system that continues this path. Jay brings a unique perspective shaped by coaching, writing, and growing up around the game. And today we'll explore what he's learned, what he's concerned about, and where he believes college football is headed next. Jay, welcome to Off Road.
Good to be here, Frank.
All right, glad to have you. Hey, your new book takes a hard look at modern college football. What was the moment or realization that made you feel that this book was needed to be written now?
I've been on the board of trustees at Penn State for about 9 years, or almost 9 years now. And in that, I've seen from a fiduciary role, trustee at Penn State, what's going on in athletics. I know from consulting on NIL what's going on, not just here, but all over the country in athletics. And there are a lot of things that need to be said. The way I chose to write it was as a novel, but it's a novel using real stories. So even though it's a novel, it takes you inside what's really going on. These are actual stories, but rather than write it as a nonfiction and have lawyers poring over everything and saying you need to contact so and let them know you're writing this or right, I said let's make it a novel, and so people can read what's really going on, and it really peels the curtains back. So I felt like there are fans out there that are confused about what's going on in college football right now. There are parents of potential football players that are confused about what's going on, and they think it's all about money and it's all going to be great. Then I realize there are mental health challenges that they're going to face, their son or daughter is going to face when they play college athletics. And there are coaches that don't have not owned up to the fact that there's some real mental health grind on them as well. So I felt like all those things collided to make this book necessary.
Got it. Yeah, I can definitely see that. College football now involves like real money.
Yeah.
NIE deals, transfer portals, outside pressures. How different is the job of a coach today compared to 10, 15 years ago?
It's massively different because of the fact that any guy in your program can leave anytime they want. So, where the idea of tough love as a coach is a very dangerous thing because a lot of people don't want tough love. So, if you try and challenge a guy, say, hey, look, you're not doing well enough, or you're not doing what you're supposed to in school or whatever, they say, well, I'm out of here because they can. Whereas 15 years ago, there was a process they had to go through to transfer. So, that's massively different. So I think that's been the biggest change is that coaches now are facing an idea that these players have complete freedom. So they can't exercise some of the controls they like to have in the past.
Because you're very candid in Blitz
Yep.
about the mental strain on players and coaches. From your perspective, where does the system break down? Where does it come to mental health? How does this need to change?
I think you have young people that all of a sudden now at 17 years old are now able to command seven figures. And they're 18 years old, 19 years old, and they have a lot of adults in their life. And there's no regulation of the system right now. The NCAA really doesn't have any rules as relates to regulating the revenue sharing or the NIL money. So all of a sudden now they're leaning on a guy down the street who says, oh, I know how to handle this, or an agent who claims to be an agent, but there's no players union to certify and regulate agents. So those players now are dealing with all these adult responsibilities without the tools to handle them. So I think that's in the consulting in the NIL, one of the things that we've talked about was even 3 and 4 years ago that schools are not preparing kids for what's coming. And I don't think they were anticipating some of the things that were coming. And so I think that's really been one of the biggest things for the players to understand that all of a sudden they've got to grow up in a hurry. And a lot of people see them as a meal ticket. And for the coaches, it's the same thing. You're dealing with always having to be on and always having to have your phone next to you because you get a call at any time with a guy leaving or a guy demanding more money or something else happening.
Wow. I never really even looked at it that way.
Yeah, if you're a coach, and I know this from coaching, when the phone rings at 12:30 at night, it's generally not your academic advisor congratulating you because 40 guys made dean's list. It's not the call you want, but if you don't answer the call, you may be held accountable in the court of public opinion or by your administration for not reacting to something in real time. It's a constant thing.
Wow. You've lived this game as a coach, and now you're reflecting on it as an author. What lessons from coaching most shaped you to tell these stories and frame the issues in the book?
I think it's just a lot of personal experience. So you understand, I understand what it's like to be in those rooms and have those conversations and was part of some of those conversations and being in that room. So I think that helped me kind of shape the book. The toughest thing was getting all this information and making it coherent and on a timeline that made sense. The organizational part of it was tough, but I leaned on some other people I know that have written books and said they gave me ideas and methods and how they get those things shaped. But certainly the impact of having to be organized, detailed. When you put together a game plan, one of the biggest mistakes coaches make is they put too much on the game plan. All of a sudden, you can't handle it all. So that's the thing with writing a book is you're generally going to have more than you need. The question is what furthers the narrative of the book and how do you get that organized?
How do you view NIL as an overdue correction for athletes, or are we creating a different set of long-term problems that people aren't talking about yet?
I think some of both. I think the reality is, if you go back, there was a skier slash football player at the University of Colorado named Jeremy Bloom, would have been in the 90s, I think. And he was a college football player, but in the offseason, he was also a world class mogul skier and won medals and things like that, and was not able to take endorsement money or free gear from certain companies as a skier because that would use his name, image, and likeness. So he couldn't do those things. Whereas guys that were playing minor league baseball could play minor league baseball and then play football or basketball or another sport, and they could get paid to play minor league baseball. So it's a correction in that some of these guys have name, image, and likeness that has some value. Their name, image, and likeness they were all being used in college football video games. Yeah, and so they deserve some of that. Now, the pendulum swung wildly to where it became an excuse to pay guys to play, where you were asking them to do 2 hours a month of texting or tweeting or social media posts about these collectives that were formed, and essentially, they were tweeting to get people to give money to a collective to raise money to pay them to tweet to raise money for the collective. There really wasn't an NIL here. It was really a money laundering scheme that they were giving to players. So those are things that go wrong with it. But I think some of the problems that we are only starting to see now are who regulates it. And there are no rules in terms of a kid wants to go in the transfer portal. There's tampering going on before they go in the transfer portal, where a school is letting that kid's high school coach or his agent know, hey, if he goes in the transfer portal, come to us. We've got X amount of dollars for him. So all those things are going on because there's no regulation of it.
Wow. I got to tell you something, just off the beaten path. How does a 14, 15-year-old kid, because they know in a year or two they're going to be drafted, how do they even deal with that? As a kid, it's got to be really hard for the parents too.
Yeah, if they don't have the right support system, it's really challenging. And I think the other challenge is that once they get to college, schools are trying to set up some of those support systems for them, but they're jumping from school to school. Some guys are going to two and three different schools.
Mhm.
So they don't really get to have the development from a support system like that. And there's also a level of distrust because now the recruiting relationship is all starting with business negotiations. When you go recruit a player out of high school, the agent's involved. And that's not just football, that's basketball. The women's volleyball coach at Penn State, Katie Schumacher-Colley, is a close friend, and she's talked about how they're dealing with agents in the recruiting process. So everything they're doing from day one starts with a business relationship in many ways, more so than a coach player relationship. And that complicates your ability to really help these kids deal with what they're dealing with because they look at you as very differently than they did as a coach than they looked at a coach 10, 12 years ago.
Oh my God, big difference.
Yeah.
Huge difference. It's one of the things is how do you discipline a kid? How do you say, hey, you got to get, there's no good grades anymore. There's a
Yeah.
lot that's all out the door.
Yeah, I
No
mean,
student athlete, no, it's like a different realm than,
I think the challenge for a coach is this: is you want to if you want to build a program that will endure, you have to sit down. If you take over a program, you have to sit down and say, "Okay, this is what I stand for, and this is what I'm looking for in players." And you have to go recruit to that, and you have to be honest with people in the recruiting process and say, "Look, if you come to our school, we're going to expect this of you. If it's only about the money, then you're just in a transactional relationship. But if you set up what your program's about and they understand that coming in, then you have a much better chance to really have that coaching relationship with them where you can have a tough conversation. You can say, hey, you weren't good enough last week, so you got to improve. Or, hey, you've got to get to class or else I'm not going to play you. And if you build that from day one, then you've got a chance to have that be effective over time. But the pressures are so much from fans and alumni and donors to go recruit all these big name guys without any regard for how they'll fit together as a team that can dissuade you from being honest up front.
yeah. It's funny, years ago, we used to do a lot of road shows with Whitey Ford. And you remember Whitey Ford
Yep.
from the New York Yankees,
Yep.
right? World Series, the whole thing. And we would talk, this is back in the 90s, and we would talk about the players today back in the 90s, like a Darryl Strawberry getting $25 million a year. And this guy said that when they were players, when they won the World Series, they got a check for $5,200. Okay. These guys had side jobs. They were painters and plumbers and stuff like that. And they knew everybody on the team. But the teammates were like brothers. So it wasn't really about the money. And I asked him about what about today? What about these guys? He goes, I don't know where the teams are anymore. I don't know where their spirit is,
Yeah.
And it was funny that he said that. It's pretty interesting. So when you look at college football today, what do you think the biggest opportunities for reform or improvement that could realistically happen, not just in theory?
I think we have to be honest about what we're doing now. At schools like Penn State or Texas or Ohio State or Michigan, you name it, we're running. We have a sports entertainment franchise that we're running. Let's stop BSing about it. Stop pretending this is an extracurricular activity being done by students. This has become big business. The Big Ten last year, their media rights deal paid, and this is just the Big Ten. This is not national. This is just the Big Ten. That media rights deal was worth about $1.1 billion a year. That's billion with a B. So there's a lot of money being made. And I think we have to be honest about what we're doing here. And in order to get this to where it makes sense, in order to get this where the players are protected and the universities are protected, we're going to just say, look, everybody's avoiding the word employee, employment, all that kind of stuff when it comes to revenue sharing and NIL. The reality is they're employees. Let's just stop trying to use euphemisms. They're working, they're playing the sport, and they're getting paid to play that sport. So you can call it what you want, but the reality is that. Now, once you have that established, I think what's good for the game would be some sort of collective bargaining, because right now there's a salary cap in place, but that's only a matter of time till somebody sues and says that's part of a settlement. And that cap was put in place by a settlement between the NCAA and a group of plaintiffs. And the next generation of kids coming up, they weren't party to that suit, so they could sue and win and say that, blow that up. So I think you have to get into a situation where you create some collective bargaining, you create some stability, and you create really a two-track. What I've advocated is a true two-track reality. If you want to come out of high school and you want to go to Penn State and you want to get an education and you want to commit to 4 years, then sign a 4-year deal that includes scholarship, room, board, books, and tuition, and the major of your choice. You want to be an engineer, you want to be an English teacher, be an English teacher, whatever it is. Or you say and that would preclude schools from after 2 years cutting you loose because you're not good enough. Because that's going on now too. The players don't really have a whole lot of protections year to year. So when you look at that, you then say, okay, if you want to take that 4-year track, then go that way. If you want to come in and say, hey, I want to be able to transfer whatever I want, I'm only going to sign for 1 year or 2 years, and I'm really interested in just going to the NFL and not going to college, then let's create a NFL apprenticeship program like you would for a lot of other professions, where now you come in and we're going to teach you financial literacy. We're going to teach you about public relations. We're going to teach you how to be a professional. We're going to teach you nutrition, all these kind of things. And if in 3 years you leave for the NFL and you're not good enough, you made that choice. And so be it. And rather than, because you have guys that transfer from one school to the next to play for 1 year,
Yeah,
and they're not even going into a classroom. They're taking 2 online classes, and we're wasting time and tuition money and everything on guys that really don't have an interest in education.
got it. Well, hey, listen, you also address corruption in campus politics head on. From your
Yeah.
experience, how entrenched are these dynamics and why are they so hard to fix?
Egos, you get egos involved, and
Yeah.
especially now where a donor is now, we're asking donors write a $20 million check because we need 20 million for revenue sharing. So now you get a guy that gives you $20 million. A lot of them want some kind of accountability. They want to know, they want some notoriety. They want people to know that they wrote that check, or they want to see certain performance return on their investment, so to speak. They want to be in a national championship game, or they want to be in the college football playoff. So that creates these situations where now you have some outsized power. Now, if the coach isn't performing to the level that this guy thinks, they're in the president of the university's ear or the athletic director's ear saying, hey, this guy's got to go. And now, so there's control there. There's, even with all the things going on with NIL, you're going to have some corruption behind the scenes where money, the rules are, there's a certain revenue share cap. There's NIL deals that are supposed to go within fair market value. That doesn't preclude you from showing up with more money in cash and saying, hey, we only have X amount of revenue share, but hey, here's another 500 grand in cash, or 50 grand in cash, or 100 grand in cash on top of what we're putting out there. Those things will have gone away for a little bit, but they're going to come back. So the corruption's going to be there.
Wow. Yeah, I can see that. Wow. You grew up inside one of the most recognizable families in football. How has your father's legacy shaped your view of the game, and where do you consciously see things going differently?
Well, I think my dad was, one of the things people don't realize, my dad was a realist. If NIL was coming around when he was still coaching, he would have said, look, it's going to happen. Let's understand it's going to happen. And then let's sit down and figure out the best way where we can all agree, players and universities, on what the best path forward is. That has not happened with the NCAA and with players. It's been just reacting to the latest lawsuit. My dad's legacy was one that he really valued the education part of it. He saw college football as a means to transform people's lives. If he were still coaching now, he would still be talking about education and getting degrees, but he also would be happy that these players have an ability to change their families' lives and stay in college and pursue a degree. We had kids over the years that after 3 years wanted to, they wanted to stay, but they didn't have money and their families needed money, so they would leave for the NFL draft maybe a year before they were ready to go, and didn't quite have the careers that they could have had. Or they waited another year, they may have improved their draft stock and made a lot more money up front. Now those players have the ability to come back and not have to sacrifice that money. And I think he would have appreciated that as well, but he certainly would have been staunchly insistent upon the educational component.
Yeah. In Blitz, you explore race as a central issue in college athletics. How do you see race influencing opportunity, pressure, and leadership today, both on and off the field?
I think one of the things is that's still one of the most difficult discussions people have in terms of race and things like that, whether it's hiring coaches or whether it's how players get along or when political issues come up. If you go back to some of the police shootings and how some schools handled their players' reaction to those things. And I write about that in the book, where there is a police shooting, and how does the of a young black man in the community where this school is, and how does the coach handle that with his players? And I've talked to a number of coaches that all had to handle these things in different situations. And so those conversations are difficult, but they have to be had. And I think one of the great things about football is if you handle things like that the right way, you have a chance to bring people together because we have a common goal when you're on a football team. When you get in the huddle, there are guys that are Christian, there are guys that are Jewish, there are guys that are Muslim, there are guys that are atheists, there are guys that are black, Hispanic, Polynesian, white, you name it. and they've all got to get together and they're wearing the same jersey. And one of the things we used to talk about is if we could just get everybody in this country to think about wearing the same jersey, not necessarily in our political views, but certainly as brothers and sisters, that would be a great example to everybody else
Yeah, the team of
about
humanity.
yeah, about what we could do together in terms of getting some things done. But I think those conversations have been more open than they were 20 years ago. People have been more willing to talk about race, and I think that's been good.
Yeah, yeah. So for young coaches entering the system now, what principles matter most if they want to lead with integrity without getting swallowed by the politics?
I think you got to be honest about what you are. And you have to say, you know what, at the end of the day, if you have a vision of what you are and you stick to that vision, you'll be more successful than if you're always trying to chase the latest whim or trend or whatever. Or, hey, this school's doing that, or everybody else is doing this. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Worry about what you stand for. Because your players, if you have one of the real geniuses of my dad's career was his core values in terms of what he wanted out of the program never wavered, but his tactics changed based on generationally and things. The way he this is a guy that coached through the 60s all the way into the 2010s, where you went from Vietnam protests and civil rights protests to the 70s, 80s, and all those things in between. And he was always able to communicate with players, but because they knew where he was coming from. And as long as you have a basis of where you stand, they know where you're coming from, and then you can have honest conversations. And I think you're seeing there are some young coaches out there right now that seem to be doing that. A guy like Ryan Day at Ohio State seems to be very grounded into what he's doing. Dante Moore, it's not Dante Moore, that's quarterback. Dan Lanning at Oregon, a guy like Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. They seem to know what they are and where they're coming from. We just hired a guy from Iowa State here at Penn State named Matt Campbell, and he's talked about what his kind of North Star or his founding principles are. And I think those things are important, and that's how you can build long-term success. And I think and as the politics come and go of trustees and administrations and those things, as long as you're consistent in who you are, you'll have a chance to be successful. And if at the end of the day, if there are some people that are petty enough that they want to get rid of you, they'll get rid of you, and then and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Looking ahead 5, 10 years, with conference realignments, playoffs expanding, and money accelerating, what does college football ultimately become? And what worries you the most if nothing changes?
If nothing changes, I think it's going to continue. I think what worries me the most is if nothing changes right now, when you talk to fans of the game, it's frustrating because their quarterback can leave. The quarterback at Alabama right now, and again, between now and when it airs, it may change, but there are quarterbacks at established schools now that are shopping themselves. And that's frustrating because you recruit a guy in, you play him for a year, you're excited about what he can become, and all of a sudden he's got people telling him, go get the money. And I think you run the risk of losing fans that way, where it becomes nothing more than transactional and guys jumping around every year, to where I love my school, but I just don't love what this has become. So I think that's a danger. I think the other dangers things that worry me about is I don't think we're doing a good enough job as universities addressing the threats from gambling. Online gambling is everywhere. I think it's simply a matter of time until there's a major scandal in big time college sports as it relates to gambling, because it's too easy to just pick up your phone and make bets. I think that concerns me as a trustee. It worries me almost every day. I think about that and how lucky we are it hasn't happened yet. I think as we go forward, what I think's got to happen and what it's going to look like is I think it's going to continue. The professionalization is going to happen of it because the money's gotten so big. And right now, when you look at the budgets and the spending in college athletics, at Penn State, we're one of the big 10 biggest in terms of revenues schools in the country. Yet we are at a break-even point or lose a little money or make a little money almost every year. And now we're adding $20 million in revenue sharing. And we're saying we got to go get donors to give us that's $20 million to cover our payroll. That's not a business. That's not a business model. That's panhandling. That's a guy with a habit who keeps going back to his brother-in-law and saying, I need more money to take care of my habit, gambling
Yeah.
or whatever. So I think that's got to happen. And I think what that looks like, it may be private equity. University of Utah has taken on a private equity partner, and that's there. They still have to vote to finalize it, but that's going to happen. The Big Ten was in negotiations to do a private capital / equity deal for the entire conference in exchange for a percentage of our media rights going forward. So I think we're all in a cash crunch, despite the appearances of all this money going around, because expenses have gone through the roof. So there's got to be some corrections in what we do and how we do it.
Wow. Jay, it's been great having you on. How can people find out about the book? Where is it? Where can they find it? Where can they find out more about you? How can they find out about where you're going to be? Are you going to be
Yeah.
doing any book signings? Tell us a little bit about what we can
Well,
find
we'll
you.
start with the website, jvpaterno.com. It's my name, Jay, the letter V, paterno.com is the best place to find out what I'm up to. And then on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it now, at Jay Paterno, JayPaterno, at Jay Paterno. Instagram, it's at JV Paterno, my first name, my middle initial, Paterno. And then the books are on Amazon. The books are on my website. The books are on where pretty much anywhere you get books, you can get it. And so that about covers it.
All right. Thank you very much for coming on. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time.